Hello, and welcome to another talk in our series for talks for the 2023 Kenojuak Ashevak Memorial Award. My name is Heather Campbell, and I'm from Redhead, Anaanatta, but I am the Strategic Initiatives Director here at the Inuit Art Foundation. Although we are all joining remotely from across North America today, I would like to acknowledge the land on which the Inuit Art Foundation is currently located. It is on the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, the original owners and custodians of this land. Today, this place is home to many, including a diverse urban Indigenous community of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis. On May 19th, 2023, the Inuit Art Foundation announced the shortlisted artists for the CAMA Award in conjunction with the opening of Anaanatta Unikkaangit, Our Mother's Stories, their group exhibition at the Winnipeg Art Gallery-Qaumajuq, which runs until November and showcases the work of Billy Gauthier, Gail Uyagaki Kabluna, Kablusiak, Maureen Grubin, and Inniniwak TV. This exhibition honors the stories, the work, and the care of mothers and grandmothers like Kenojuak Ashevak that guide contemporary Inuit art. So this is the first year that CAMA includes a special exhibition for the shortlist, thanks to the exceptional support of RBC Emerging Artists. In addition to the exhibition, each artist showcased or shortlisted for the award receives a $5,000 cash prize. The winner will be announced at the ceremony on September 22nd at WAG-Qaumajuq, which will also be the launch of the 2021 CAMA winner, Taralik Duffy's solo exhibition, Gasoline Rainbows. Today, we have the pleasure of being in conversation with Marianne Redhead, the Assistant Curator of Indigenous and Contemporary Art at the Winnipeg Art Gallery-Qaumajuq, who organized the 2023 Shortlist exhibition. So Marianne is an Inniniwak and French and obtained her Bachelor of Arts in English honors with a focus on curatorial studies. She is returning to the University of Winnipeg this September to begin her MA in Curatorial Practices. Her curatorial goals are to increase and improve Indigenous visibility and representation in collections and exhibitions at WAG-Qaumajuq. So welcome, Marianne.
Yeah, Tanse Totemak, Marianne Nagasun. I'm so happy to be here with you all today to talk about Anaanatta Unikkaangit and the artists that have been shortlisted for the Kenojuak Ashevak Memorial Award. It's important for me to position myself. So I am registered with the Fox Lake Cree Nation, and I'm originally from Churchill, but then I moved to Winnipeg as a child. And my paternal grandparents are the late Jonathan Redhead and Mariah Beardy, originally from York Factory, and our ancestors lived in the territories along the southern cusp of the Hudson Bay and the mighty rivers that spill into it in Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. Fox Lake, like so many other communities living along the Nelson River in northern Manitoba, have been negatively impacted by Manitoba hydro development. Beginning in the 1950s to today. This occurred while communities were still reeling from residential schools and similar attempts at assimilation. The impacts of all this were so severe that my father's generation lived a very different life than that of his parents, who lived in the bush, and many of my Cree family now live in Thompson or Winnipeg. So for most of my life, I've lived in and around Winnipeg, near my mother's side of the family. And on my maternal side, I'm descended from French settlers. But I grew up having easy access to that facet of my identity, including language and community. But I just say all this because I cannot disconnect who I am as a person, but also as a curator and as somebody who likes to create. I can't disconnect that from my work as a curator and my art, because my experience informs my perspective, my values, and my judgments. So I think it's important for any artist or any creative to be fully aware of how their life experiences and positionality in the world shape their perceptions of their work and the communities that they work with. So I can talk a little bit too about how I got into curating and all of that. So in the last couple of years of my undergrad, I was studying English, not necessarily English literature, but my classes were kind of on the topic of cultural studies and analysis of contemporary culture, which includes visual arts. And so I grew up going to museums and galleries, and always saw myself as having a career in the arts. But I became really inspired when I started visiting local artist-run centers and spaces and attending art events in Winnipeg. And I was really inspired by Indigenous artists. And I also got involved with Gallery 103, which is the University of Winnipeg's campus, art gallery campus on campus. And I did a curatorial internship there. And then I got to work on a couple projects with my friend Mariana Munoz Gomez. And then I also worked on the Artworks renaming initiative at WAG-Qaumajuq, which kind of helped me. It kind of ignited an interest in working with public art collections and the potential that it has to reimagine and critically think about collections, exhibitions, and decentering whiteness in the sort of like canon of art history, and centering Indigenous perspectives. So I worked in a different department at the WAG before I came into this position, but that's how I landed here. And then I've been in this role since February. So this exhibition actually was the first one that kind of got delegated to me. And I'm very thankful that it was my first one, because it was just such an honor and such a joy to be able to work with these amazing artists.
Thank you. I know it's, as a former curator, I'm just so happy to see more sort of younger Indigenous people, especially women, coming up in the field. I think is such a strong voice for all of us to have. And I'm so happy that you're over there helping them out. We got a chance to meet in person in Winnipeg when I was there to announce the shortlist. And you had mentioned how interesting it was for you as a First Nations woman to be curating Inuit art in particular. So I wanted to see if you wanted to chat a bit about that.
Yeah, so I was thinking about being in good relation. I think that's kind of the framework that I try to work with a lot in just my work in general, like Wakotowin and the idea of like kinship and relatives. And my mom on my on my French side, she worked in the museum in Churchill in the 90s, and she was kind of talking a little bit about the relationships between Cree, Inuit, and Dene people that were living up there, and how it always seemed kind of almost like tense or something. And I don't know if that's her interpretation of it. I don't know really, but I was just thinking, like, I just want this to be coming from a good place. And I don't want to be trying to position myself as an expert either on, Inuit culture, Inuit art. I think I kind of was thinking of myself as like a conduit between like the ingenuity of Inuit art and the public here around WAG-Qaumajuq. But I'm also aware that as somebody who isn't Inuk, but I'm tasked with showing Inuit art in a museum setting, that also comes, it's very fraught with, these problematic practices that often happen. So in museum settings. So I was thinking about like things like, how would I want a non-Cree person to approach curating, contemporary Cree art? And obviously it would be great if it was, a Cree person doing that. But in the cases where that doesn't happen, I would just want that person to be aware of the specificities of being Cree there's so many different types of different Cree, and it's the same with Inuit. There's different regions, different ways of relating with the land, different materials, different languages. So I just wanted to respect those distinctions. But then also recognizing that there's a thread that keeps everything kind of pulled together. And there's things that even, as a First Nations person, I relate to Inuit art too. So there's like things that really do tie us all together. And I think it's that strength and that resilience, even though, we experience settler colonialism in different ways. I think the processes were different to get us completely eliminated was completely different. But there's still ways that we show our strength and the way that we continue, and through our art. So I think that's one thing I do relate to. And I think about when I think about being in good relations. And I think that there's another process that we kind of relate to as well, in terms of conforming to a certain expectation or stereotype of art. I think Inuit especially, you see it still sort of, still very pervasive, where you think of Inuit art being this kind of rigid set of rules of this is what it should be. And I feel like it's the same thing for First Nations art. But yet, we still make art that is about us and for us, and not about, the collectors or whoever wants us to conform to these expectations. So I think that was another way that I was trying to relate to this as well. And I also just want to acknowledge Jocelyn Pirinen, who left us. She was amazing. She is amazing. And she's still doing amazing things and will continue to do amazing things. I am so grateful for the brief time that I had with her before she moved on to the National Gallery. But yeah, mainly it's just not coming at it as like an expert or somebody who's like a know-it-all on Inuit culture and art, but just allowing it to be. I think that was really important for me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think early in my career, I got to work with a lot of First Nations artists and curators, and it was such a learning experience to see there are ways that maybe you were going in this direction before us. So being able to learn from other Indigenous people is so important too. So just having, whether it's an Inuit curator or First Nations curator, we're still going to get very similar perspectives in some ways, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think it made it easier for you to sort of develop a theme and a title for the exhibition and to pick out the specific works?
Yeah, I definitely so at this point at the WAG, I haven't really like kind of forged a signature like Marianne kind of mark yet. But I think I am interested in bringing forward the roles and positions of mothers. And I think that's what informed my decision to bring that theme forward with the show. I was reading a little bit about Kenojuak Ashevak and her legacy, and I was just so struck by the way that, for example, her generation to like my generation, so many things have changed, and so many policies have been in place to try and like completely assimilate or eliminate us. And yet there's something that was passed down to each generation. And you see even with the shortlist, there is, it's multi-generational. There's artists who are from an older generation and some that are newer. And it's just so exciting. I thought I wanted to bring that forward. The idea that there's something being transmitted between the generations. And I was thinking about the roles of grandmothers, because for me personally, that was a person, a figure in my life who transmitted that pride, that resilience, that courage. And so, and you know, the idea of, you know, a grandmother sitting there working on something with her hands, beading, doing embroidery, what have you, sewing, you know, laughing, drinking her tea. It's just something that I feel like we all relate to. And it just gives us such a feeling of like home, of, yeah, feeling safe and feeling like we know like who we are. So I wanted to capture that. And stories specifically, I think, I was thinking about the way that stories really do guide us. They give us a sense of like who we are. And you can't really take away the role of stories either from the artists that are shown in the exhibition. I think pretty much every piece of art in the exhibition is about a story, whether that be like, you know, a traditional story, or just a story that was a memory that was passed down. I think that's really what inspired me. And of course, specifically Maureen Grubin's work. I think it really came from that too.
For the actual works in the show, are they being pulled from the WAG's collection, or did you have to borrow works, or how did you get the actual works for the show?
We have quite a number of works by Inniniwak TV in our collection, and also because we have on long-term loan the government of Nunavut's art collection as well. So we have quite a few of Inniniwak's works, and so I was able to use some of her work from our collection. The others are on loan from either the artist directly or from a collector.
And were you able to actually connect with the artists and talk to them directly? And how did those relationships kind of develop? And what did you learn through that process?
Yeah. Well, the main thing I learned, I think, just in interacting with the artists, but also just from like the research I've done on each of them, is that they're just all so funny. They have such a good sense of humor. I did have the honor of interacting with, I think, every one of them in some way. I reached out to them actually because I wanted to see if they had any thoughts on the artwork that they wanted represented in the exhibition. I know that shortlist exhibitions, you might want to have an artwork that is very like representative of the artist's career and practice. But I also kind of wanted it to come from them directly, because I was kind of thinking of myself as like a conduit. And in some cases, it was a little more challenging, I will say. But in others, it was the artist seemed to know right away what they wanted to show. So like Maureen just sent me something right away, and I was like, I love this. I love the idea of having stories shown in a museum setting. And I just love the way she also said in her talk, if you want to read the stories, you have to go to the WAG. And it's true. I look at the pages sometimes, and I read the stories, and I get really invested. And it was, I think Kenojuak was one. I think we all kind of have an idea at this point of like what you would expect to see from Kenojuak. And it would have been, cool to have like an upik or something like that. But I also wanted to show the variety of disciplines that the artists work with. And I wanted to have, 3D, 2D. I wanted to have installation. I wanted to have textiles, graphic art. I wanted to have kind of a different, like carvings, of course. So I really did want to have a different, just a variety of things going on in there. So it actually worked out really well, because I think Qaumajuq certainly is, a multidisciplinary artist, works in a variety of media, but installation, I think, was just a very interesting choice. A lot of people kind of see that work and they're like, what is this? What does this mean? And working with, Gail is, I love working with Gail because she's just a very warm, genuine person. And it was just, the passion that she has for her art really does come through. I had a really hard time narrowing down the works that I wanted to include in the exhibition and how I wanted to display them as well.
You mentioned that the space is actually quite small as well. So it must be a bit of a challenge sort of working in that, within those dimensions, and then having to have a lot of awareness of how one piece is speaking to another piece and which one it's across from or next to.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that. And also the space. I don't know how many folks have been to WAG-Qaumajuq, but the space that the shortlist exhibition is in is basically like you go down a corridor and then you're into Qaumajuq, into the it was called the Inuit Art Center, where Inniniwak happened, and where right now it's Inuit Anaanatta. And it's really kind of an interesting space in that way. When I give tours of Inuit Anaanatta, I like to highlight, Qaumajuq, Marine Gruben, Billy's got a piece in there, and Niyuhulu has a piece in there as well. And then Gail's grandmother, Victoria, Mamnuguksulua, also is featured in that show, and is also featured in the shortlist exhibition. Like, her image is there. So I like to point that out to people, and I think they're just really excited by that. So I think the space also kind of works in that way. But yes, you're right. There have been challenges for sure, because there are so many different types of media, and all conversing, and some of them have very hard topics, and then you have that sort of contrasted with very kind of cheerful, or kind of just more comfy domestic kind of setting. But I think that also converses in very interesting ways too, because there's the table and the chair the doll is sitting on, with Qaumajuq's installation, but then they're also the table with Gail's ceramic pieces. And I think that there's really interesting ways to think about that as well. So as much as it was a challenge, it was also an opportunity to bring a lot of interesting work into conversation with each other.
I was thinking about this space as well, that if you look through one doorway, you can actually see the gallery that has all of the, I think it's Canadian, like sort of older classical Canadian art. So if you're going up from the more traditional Inuit art and going into the European or the Canadian, and then you're in this sort of magical little space where things are just kind of commingling and are very contemporary. And the fact that we do have all of these aspects in one room, I mean, that's what Inuit culture is right now, right? It's all there. It's just all a part of our lives right now. Yeah, we can see a little bit here of Ningiuk looks in the back.
Yeah.
Billy's here.
I like this image because it's juxtaposing, Billy Gautier's Sedna's Tears with Ningiukalu's sea goddess drawing in the back with the hair, the flowing hair. I think that's one of the things that people are drawn to when they see Ningiukalu's drawings and also Billy's work. Billy's work is just so intricate, so detailed, and capturing that movement of the hair. It's just something else. It's you see it and you're like, yeah, I understand, I get it. And it's very small too. It's a very small carving. Here it kind of looks a little blown up, but when you see it in the space, it definitely takes up a smaller space. And then it's the same thing with his piece that's in Inuit Sinaugani. It's even smaller than this. But he is just such a gift for capturing that movement. Ningiukalu as well, just that gift for taking an entire story that has so many different phases to it, different actions happening, and then condensing it into one image. And this is the same thing, exact same thing with Billy and his carvings.
We can sort of see Kalusiak's piece behind the drummer there as well. So it's they're quite far away, but they're still speaking, that we have a sound element in that room. So we're looking at a drum dancer, but we're actually hearing what exactly?
Yeah, you're hearing basically like a scary movie soundtrack. There's this there's this very kind of kitschy, haunted house kind of sound going on, screams, and just the kind of stuff you'd hear if you were wandering through a haunted house. And I was listening to Billy's talk with the IAF about shamanism, and it is like Heather, you pointed it out. It's really interesting looking at the juxtaposition of this with the image of the cemetery in Tuktoyaktuk. I think this is just Billy's work. He just does such a great job at combining different materials, very stone with organic material like hide and bone. But yeah, the thematic kind of elements here at play. Actually, looking at this is kind of the first time I'm really seeing them interact in a way that's very provocative.
We've got them playing against each other, sort of the way that there are tensions in real life and the culture today of Christianity and learning more about traditional spirituality and all of the mixed feelings that maybe some people could have about that. So yeah, I think it's really nice pairing here.
Yeah, it's very and the colors here too are just very black and white, and I think there's I think when people think about that, it's a topic that does feel very sort of black and white. And again, it's something I relate to as well, with, my community's interactions with Christianity and then spirituality, that sort of return to or looking for some, traditional forms of spirituality.
You were talking about feeling a connection with Maureen and her work.
Yes.
These probably don't look the scale either now that we're just looking at them as a photograph, but they're actually how big?
The pages are 8.5 by 11. inches each. It takes up a whole wall. Basically, yeah, when you walk into the gallery, it's to the left. That whole left wall is taken up by these pages, by these stories, and these mittens. And I'm grateful that, yeah, Maureen brought it up in her talk as well. It's basically, these pages are transcribed from an interview with Susie Tiktaalik. So this is called Tiktaalik. And she is one of the last, or is the last woman to be, with her dogs on the land in Inuvialuit. And so she was known for her muskox mittens. And I think I'm just interested in the way that these mittens are placed also on the page. They're sort of like obfuscating the words and the stories that are, they're transcribed in English. So as somebody who's interested in language and interested in words, I think that's a really interesting way to place the mittens, so like right in the middle, so that you're kind of like having to almost guess what the story is and what the missing lines are. But then some stories are you're able to read them still. There's one about polar bears, which I love because I am very fascinated by polar bears. And then she also had a local carver make the needles that are shown on here. There's ulus, and then Arctic cotton, yeah. I think that also the way the stories don't really follow kind of like a linear narrative. They're just all almost like fragmented. So I think that's really interesting. And also, it's just so Maureen Grubin. You walk into the space, I heard somebody literally say like, oh, that must be Maureen Grubin, because it's just such a playful combination of, yeah, these like manufactured, like very plastic kind of materials with things that you would associate with living on the land. And I think that is what makes her art so noticeable. And so interesting. So yeah.
It's so intriguing because you can't help but wonder, like, why did she choose mittens? I mean, if there are meanings to each of the designs, or yeah, like you can think up your own narratives around why she's made the choices that she has.
Yeah.
I think we might be having a look at Gail's piece now. I love this corner because of these amazing, like the hand wallpaper. I want some for my living room. What is the story behind this one?
Well, obviously, Gail is just such a great, graphic designer. It's so amusing watching people walk into this space, because one of the first things they do is like gasp, and they just look at that corner. And I kind of refer to it as like the Gail corner, because it's so color. There's just so much going on, and I think that's very representative of Gail, especially in her career right now. There's a lot, and I wanted to highlight, there's the imagery of like the tattoos. I think that comes up a lot in Gail's work. So I really wanted to bring that forward. The multiple images being kind of repeated, that comes up a lot as well. And I know that Gail has also had a lot of success with selling, like commercially successful artist. I think this wallpaper she may even have been selling, maybe, I'm not sure, but just obviously the people want it. So, and I also love the use of the red rose tea. That's something else that I feel like it just made me feel like home kind of, and it just made me feel so comfortable and happy. And then juxtaposed with, you know, the image of her grandmother, Inniniwak, and the act of sewing, which I think is, you know, we see that with Maureen's work as well, making, creating, and sewing, of course, is important for living life in, you know, in the Arctic and in the North. It's kind of the only thing you can really do to survive the elements. So I think about that as being transmitted through the generations, and how, Inuit culture, cultures continue to flourish, and not only flourish, but also just come up with like this amazing art. And ceramics is something that I think sometimes folks might not, I don't know, when I give tours here at the WAG, people are really interested in pottery, ceramics made by Inuit, because it's not something that is traditionally seen as like a traditional art form. So I really appreciated having that included. And also, I didn't necessarily want to have it on a plinth or on a pedestal, like a traditional museum pedestal. And I think that's something that I want to keep in the future, working on future exhibitions at the WAG. Having objects, having artwork, not necessarily seen as something that is like a symbol of like conquest on something that you would associate with a traditional like museum method of displaying, but something that is living and something that is still used, and something that is being cared for. I think I want to explore those ways of displaying Indigenous art, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis. So I think it was just hard for me to think of putting something so vibrant and so, I don't know, interesting, just so inspiring on like a traditional pedestal, where I think the idea of pedestals and plinths originated from these very like colonial processes of looting and then displaying what the loot from your colonial conquests. So yeah,
it's so funny. Like I've heard people say that before, but I never truly got it. I swear to you that I just got it the way that you explained it to me. So thank you for that, because I had visited London like 20 years ago or something. I went to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and at one point, like I had to leave. I was just so overwhelmed by that sense of things being taken, you know? Oh, sorry, my daughter's home.
Yes. I totally know what you mean. It's something that's stemming, I think, from my experience too, as an Indigenous person visiting museums, and then seeing these objects that were made by an ancestor kind of displayed in a way that it's almost like they're not here anymore. And but we managed to keep this like one artifact, and we're showing it to you. So I wanted to kind of try to subvert that. But then, as you can see here, for Kablusiak's installation, the doll is on a plinth that's like uncovered. That's something else that to keep in mind too with curating. I think it really does depend too on who owns the artwork, because a private collector might not be so okay with you just having an artwork display for the public to potentially touch. But I think we also need to give more credit to people to the public that they kind of do know when not to touch things. But I did specifically want the doll here on a plinth. And I think it's just because of the way that what the doll is representing, really. And I think it's really interesting too, the look on the doll's face. It's just almost this very like cheeky expression. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody pointed out that like when you walk in to the space and you see the doll, it almost looks like the doll is like looking at you, kind of like they know something, the doll knows something about you that you don't even know. And it is a little spooky, especially with the sound. But yeah, this is one of those, this is an installation I think a lot of people are kind of like puzzled about. And it's one of those examples of taking a topic that is very difficult to talk about in, just like everyday language, English language. And Qaumajuq does such a good job at subverting and almost kind of reversing a certain gaze. I think a gaze that we often have when we walk into a museum and look at Indigenous arts. It almost feels like the gaze is looking back at you, actually, as the viewer. But then the doll is also looking at this image of, the cemetery in Tuktoyaktuk, which is also very site specific. It's this piece, this is one piece that the artist actually wanted to show for this exhibition, but it felt so real to me when they told me that they wanted to put this in the exhibition, because at the time I was also thinking a lot about grief and about what was lost, and about I was looking at images of the cemetery in Churchill, actually, where some of my ancestors, some of my relatives are buried. So literally that same day, Qaumajuq sent me these images and said, this is what I want to put. And I was just astounded. I think it's just such an interesting way to deal with that very difficult experience that a lot of us have.
I couldn't help but think of that piece. Was it Manet, where it was one of the first times that the nude woman, she was reclining in the picnic, surrounded by the men that are clothed, and she's actually looking out at the audience. It's almost as if this is Inuit art's sort of Manet moment, where we're kind of aware of that gaze and we're reversing it. And I think with Gail's piece, the fact that you put it on just like an everyday table, and we're seeing these objects as everyday things that you could use, it's a way of decolonizing your space, so that we have Inuit elements in the artwork, in the actual wall that the artwork is hanging on, and even the everyday things that you're using, like your plate and your cup. So it's a way of putting symbols of indigeneity all around you. So we sort of have that, and then we have this, and sort of how they speak together. And yeah, it is so good. Like, I wish I had a bit more time to have a look at it when I was in Winnipeg. But
come back then.
I'll try.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. It's those details that I feel like it's my responsibility to really, all of our responsibility really as curators to look at and think about. And then moving to a different note here. This is Kiakshuk's Polar Bear by Ningiokulu TV. And this is my absolute favorite drawing from Ningiukulu. I love this one. Actually, I think I sent Ningiukulu a list of images of her artwork that we have in the collection here. And I asked her, like, what's your favorite? And she said this one, and also another one I unfortunately don't have an image of, but it was in Inniniwak, and it's called Fish Soup. And yeah, just two very different drawings, but this one is, I just love it because I think it came about when she was visiting with Darlene Coward-White, who is the curator of Inuit art. I also do want to credit Darlene because, working on my first exhibition, I wasn't sure about how to go about certain things, and Darlene knows a lot of people and stuff. So thanks, Darlene, for your help. This drawing came about when Darlene was talking to Ningiukulu about, and she was reading from a pamphlet, I think, about a shaman who was able to transform like a ball of snow into a polar bear. And again, it's just this amazing ability that she has to make, you just look at this and you're like, what is that? Like, what is this hand holding this animal that should be very large? And just this ability to make things, turn this very like, the idea of transformation. Like, I mean, transformation is in so many Inuit stories, but it's just really coming through here in this drawing. And I think her use of the black background, black paper with the colors on top of it really made it look so much more vibrant and alive and gave it so much depth. So yeah, this is, I think, well, Ningiukulu's work is like, we all love it at the WAG. She has so many drawings that just evoke so many questions, and they look so cute and so interesting and so funny. Yeah, this is another one. The one that got away is called, I just love the expression on the fisherman's face. It's like, I don't know if it's shock or like dismay, I'm not sure, but it's also a great example of the way that Ningiukulu kind of plays with like composition and scale in her work. The fish being so huge, kind of at the forefront. You don't know if the fish is actually like a big fish or if it's just like, so it's close to the viewer. I think she plays with that so well. And yeah, I just feel like it's one of those drawings that we have in the collection that just hasn't been shown as much. And then, I wanted them placed kind of like in a cluster, all in conversation with each other. And it's funny because I originally had selected work that was all about polar bears, because as I mentioned, I'm really into polar bears. But I thought maybe I could make an interesting message about like climate change. I don't know, my dad tells me that polar bears are wreaking havoc in Churchill right now too. I was like, because of the, the melting and of the ice caps and all that. But I just thought that it would be, I wanted to show more than just my, like, what I was interested in, and show what Ningiukulu is so good at. And I think that's the sea goddess is an example of that. And then, just the use of color, the hair, the braids, the tail, like just everything about this. It's also, when you see it in person, it's like very, your eyes just very drawn to it.
I love how all of the creatures are sort of within her instead of external things or in her hair. So often we'll see them in her hair, but they're sort of a part of her in this one.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. Yeah, I love that. And then I also wanted to pay tribute to Ningiokulu's book, Alego Goes Digging, I think it's called, or maybe just Alego. And it's about like, a child going digging for clams. So I wanted to pay tribute to that too. It would have been so amazing if she could have came and read her story to some kids or something. I was really, really hoping to meet the artists and have them do something like that. But yeah, I just really wanted to show that. And I think, well, the barcode is an interesting detail on this artwork as well. I think obviously Ningiokulu's work, it depicts a lot of traditional elements, traditional stories. But then there's also, and I think this is the same with like Billy's work, there's a lot of evoking like contemporary issues as well. I think when I think of barcodes, I just think of like going to the grocery store and having to scan things. And then I think of like food insecurity. So kind of hinting at these, I guess these very contemporary problems.
And it's about reusing as well. I know here in Labrador, we're part of Newfoundland, we eat a lot of salt beef and salt pork, and they come in these little buckets. So we get like bigger buckets of things, and we end up reusing the buckets until they fall apart. And it's very often for harvesting traditional foods. So it's berries or clams, mussels, like sea snails. I don't know what you call them. But yeah, that's what I think of as well. And interestingly, that whole grouping, there isn't any hunting. So we have gathering, we have fishing, we have sort of magic making, and, the personification of magic, which is Nuliayu.
Yeah. Yeah, true. That's interesting. So, yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Hey?
Oh, I just said I didn't even think of that. I wanted to like highlight, well, it's an activity, especially in the book, that the child is doing with the grandmother. So again, just this transmission of knowledge, of practices, of like just daily life, from grandmothers and mothers to their children. So I really wanted to bring that forward.
We only have one question, and it says, sorry, did I hear just a minute ago, Dene? Isn't that Navajo in southwestern US?
Yeah, just to clarify, Dene, Dene. It's a group that's kind of found, I think in like the northern parts of a lot of the prairie provinces. And then there's also Dine, which is the Navajo, which is, in the southern US. So there are two different groups here.
I wanted to ask you a bit about the award itself. So in terms of the importance of the award, the Kenojuak Ashevak Memorial Award, what do you think is most influential or more important about that award?
Well, I think the main thing is the support that it's giving, like the financial support that it's giving Inuit artists, the ability for them to connect with audiences across across Canada. And because people are really interested. I mean, I see it firsthand working at the WAG. People like love Inuit art, and it's a great opportunity for them to see like I guess the survivance and the just how like amazing, playful, jovial, cheerful Inuit art is, still today, and it can have so many different forms. I think that is in itself the legacy of Kenojuak Ashevak, but it also provides this opportunity to think about like the future of Inuit art. So I think the Winnipeg Art Gallery-Qaumajuq has in some ways like benefited from displaying the massive Inuit art collection that it has in its care. And I think this partnership that we have with the IAF to honor Inuit art, contemporary Inuit artists, is so important. And I think, it's something that I think we should have for a lot of different communities too. I think it's just, it's honoring where you came from, but also looking forward to the future. I think that's what's so wonderful about this award.
I like that. I should have warned you that I didn't think of this until now, but approximately how many visitors does the WAG-Qaumajuq get? Well, I guess it's only been here for a short time, but what is that visitor population like? And it must be different because Winnipeg has a large Indigenous population. Have you had a lot of interaction between the Indigenous public and this exhibition?
We get like tens of thousands of visitors. And there was a huge turnout when I did a tour on Indigenous Peoples Day in June. It was probably one of the biggest groups I've had. There was so much interest in it. I think it would be interesting to have, I think it's a great opportunity for the WAG to have more programming and events that have like First Nations and Inuit interact and create together in different ways. I think there's just a lot of opportunity there for that. I think, of course, First Nations people, they're showing up a lot more than they used to. And I think that, I think it has to do with the way kind of prioritizing Indigenous art, which includes Inuit art and First Nations and Métis.
So with all of this exposure that the CAMA winner will be getting, what do you think what kind of an impact will it have on their career, on the shortlisted artist's career as well, and sort of just people's perceptions of Inuit art in general?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that Inuit art has such an interesting way of interacting with like pop culture. And of course, we see that with Tara Duffy's work, which is, it's pop art. And people are super excited by that, actually. I think it's like a form of art that I haven't seen people get as excited about in a long time. And I think I'm just really excited because I feel like it's something that people like actually really want to see. And I think it's time for that. I think also, like I was saying, there's a lot of perception around what the stereotypical idea of like Inuit art is, and not to take away from that either, because it's just so rich. There's a lot of attention to detail and all that goes into those kind of more traditional art forms, or like stereotypical art forms. But I think it's really important to recognize that like Inuit and Indigenous people in general are still here. We still exist. We still interact with culture. We still interact with our environments, and we face a lot of different issues. And yeah, we can still make art about it, and we can still, just kind of make something beautiful out of it, make something that people will enjoy, and bring about dialogue, bring about conversation. That's a huge part of it too.
Especially with we've got works that are installation art or mixed media art. I think we're seeing a lot more Inuit art that is more concept based rather than sort of that material based. And it's interesting to see what this generation of artists is doing. I feel as if there's more of that, shifting the gaze that we have talked about, as well as Inuit appealing to other Inuit first, I think, rather than that sort of catering to a Southern market, maybe that may have happened a bit more in the past.
Yes. I love that. And I think that that's the future of art, of Indigenous art. I'm hoping to see more of that. I think that's kind of one of the goals too with partnering with IAF for the Kenojuak Ashevak Memorial Award, is to be able to acquire more contemporary Inuit art into our collection, and kind of just expand those perspectives that people have. And
Do you have anything coming up that you're working on that you're allowed to share with us?
I personally do, but in terms of Inuit art, there is the Dark Ice that will be opening later this year. Yes, at the end of the year at the WAG. That one is Leslie Reed, and it's talking about like climate change and photography, and it's coming from the Ottawa Art Gallery. So yeah, that one's coming up in later on this year. And then there's also Towards Home, also opening in the next little while. And we are also on the lookout for an Inuk curator.
Ah, yes, put a plug out there.
Yeah. Yes, we absolutely would love for that position to be filled. And I would love to have, more, to be able to continue these conversations more and bring about these really meaningful exhibitions. Yeah.
So I hope that Qaumajuq will be having many more amazing shows to come. I know you have one of the most impressive Inuit art collections, your own personal collection, as well as what is being housed for the government of Nunavut. I also hope that you'll be getting more artwork from other regions like the Western Arctic, Northern Quebec, and of course, Nunatsiavut, which is where I'm from. But I'm glad to see that the collecting is still happening, and that it will only enrich the exhibitions that you have coming up. Are you thinking of ways already of how you might be able to incorporate some of your new acquisitions in upcoming programming?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I would love to see more exhibitions that incorporate just imagery of contemporary Indigenous life. And I think that especially Terlik Duffy's work will fit that for sure. Work that kind of tackles the issue of like climate change could be interesting as well. So definitely there's ways that we we're trying to expand our Indigenous art collection, so this will help a lot. I feel like contemporary Indigenous art is kind of Indigenous and First Nations art, and Métis art is kind of lacking a little bit. So I'm thinking of ways that we can have those conversations, especially as WAG-Qaumajuq is located on Treaty 1 territory. I think there's a lot of different ways we can work with that.
And as we're winding down, I know Taralik has been working on her residency as well. How are things going with that, and what can you expect between now and the winner's ceremony?
Things are going okay, and I think we're all just really excited to see the exhibition and then see the announcement of the winner of the 2023 Kenojuak Ashevak Memorial Award. I think it'll just be a very fun show, very colorful, very vibrant. It's pop art, so you can't really go wrong with that. There will be prints, there'll be sculpture and color, and everything seems to be going great. So please tune in for that.
September. So all the details are on which section of the website? Is it in the the special exhibitions section, or is it in the events section? I always forget.
It should be in both. So the award ceremony, all of that, the awards and ceremony announcement and the opening should be in the event section, and then upcoming exhibitions, Gasoline Rainbows should be in there as well. So Gasoline Rainbows is the name of the of Taralik's exhibition.
Excellent, thank you so much. Since we don't have any more questions, I think we're going to close things up for the night, but I'm so happy that you were able to join us and give us a glimpse into what your curatorial practice was, or your process was for putting this exhibition together. I think it looks amazing, and I think it truly was a representation of what not only these artists are doing today, but what Inuit art is today. So I can't wait to see what else is coming up next. For us here on the Inuit Art Foundation side, if you've missed any of the talks, we have them on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to see, we would like to see all of you at the CAMA winner ceremony at the Winnipeg Art Gallery on September 22nd at 7 p.m. Central Time. So you can RSVP by emailing executive-director@inuitartfoundation.org. So thank you, miigwech, nukumig, and everyone have a great day.